Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas. Who are you?
You know by now, I'm Stephen Ryan.
And we do post every week, so hit subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to hear what we're doing immediately every week. Stephen, I'm seeing something fragrant and beautiful.
You certainly are.
It's not you.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about one of my national collections, which is...
One of your national collections.
One of my national collections, and that is the genus Sambucus, or the Elderflowers.
Aha.
And I think my collection's around about 25, 30 different varieties.
But we're not going to do 25. How many do you think we're going to do today?
Oh, we'll probably get through about 8 to 10 of the best ones.
Okay, the top 10, the best hits.
Yes, or something like that. But don't add them up. We might only have 9 when it's finished.
Okay. But first, national collections. Why are they important? Where do they sit in the botanic world?
All right. Well, some gardeners will have noticed
Yes.
that the variety of plants available in nurseries and garden centres is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
So we're losing the botanical important species and forms and varieties if they're no longer particularly fashionable.
Yes.
So they're disappearing.
Yes.
So in England there is the Plant Heritage Organisation that registers collections. In Australia we have Plant Trust, which does the same thing.
Yes, of which I'm a member.
Yeah, and of which I'm the president.
You are indeed.
So Plant Trust registers collections, and the idea being that if somebody has a passion for a group of plants, they register with Plant Trust so that those plants can then be documented. We know where they are. If they disappear out of cultivation, we can always get them back if we need to. If somebody wants to study the group, they can get material. Somebody's doing breeding programs, they can get material. And there's collections being held in private gardens, in parks, botanic gardens, all over Australia.
And anyone can nominate themselves for this? You don't have to be a horticulturalist or a professional?
You have to have a passion. So if you've got a passion for a particular group of plants, you can get your collection registered with Plant Trust in Australia. What happens is you have to document your collection properly, obviously. Then you submit it to the organisation. You will then normally go on to a provisional list for 2 years to make sure you're keeping in your energy levels up and your love of that particular group of plants going.
I've moved on.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do. So, you know, that is an issue. If somebody registers a collection and then they lose interest in it, well, then, you know, the whole point is lost.
It is.
And so once you've gone through that mandatory 2 years, then your collection is registered. Then if you're a private person, we try and make sure that there's also a backup collection in public space somewhere. So that's the next plan, is to have a botanic gardens that's got my elderflower collection or my acanthus collection or any of the other collections I'm holding, because one day I won't be here.
Stephen, hush, hush, hush. Who else has got the Sambucus collection?
Nobody yet. So I'm holding the collection at this stage.
The weight of the world is on your shoulders.
Yeah, and some of them are ones I imported. So although I am propagating them and selling them through my nursery, so hopefully that they are being grown in other places. But yes, I would like to see another Sambucus collection being held in a public space.
There you go. If Sambucus is your thing, maybe we can convince someone else to develop a national collection. Okay, so what are some basics about the genus then? Where is it from? What is it like? What is it not like? I guess there's many options.
Well, there is. I'm collecting mainly forms of Sambucus nigra, so I'm actually collecting mainly forms of the one species, although I have other species in my collection as well. Race Mosa, I have canadensis, I have a few others in my collection as well, but it's mainly about nigra, which is a European species, basically. But there are herbaceous species in Europe, and there's also some herbaceous species that are native to Australia.
We have native ones here.
Yeah, we have native elderflowers. So it's a broad spread genus, and they're tough. They will grow in very cold climates. I'm sure you can grow them in Norway and Sweden and Alaska and all those sorts of places. They're not as fond of tropical climes, I might add.
But are there some native tropical ones? I imagine there might be.
No, they're basically coolish climate ones. They grow in forests and things in southern Australia, most of ours. So they're a very hardy group of plants. And in fact, there is one issue with them, and that is that in some areas, here specifically, they can become a little weedy. So the exotic species you've got to keep tabs of so that they don't become weedy in your garden.
So wherever you live, you need to check whether or not it's a registered weed or an exotic pest.
And if you're growing them for their culinary and other uses, then you just need to keep an eye out for any self-sown seedlings that are coming up and make sure you deal with those in an expeditious way.
What are the culinary and other uses? Now, I've heard of elderflower wine.
Yes. Well, elderberry wine.
Elderberry wine.
Yes. No. So you use the fruit for wine. You can make pies, you can make jams.
Jam, I've also seen jam.
So you can go down quite a number of different ways with the fruit.
And all of the fruit from all of the different varieties able to be used in that same
all
way?
of the fruit of all of the varieties of Sambucus nigra, not necessarily the other species in the genus. So you need to be specific about which Sambucus you're growing.
Do your homework.
All of the cultivars that I grow, the variegated ones, the red leaf ones, all the different types, I can use the flowers or the fruit. But it's more than just using the fruit.
Yes.
The flowers, of course, can be used because you can make elderflower cordial, which is something we do every year. We make enough cordial to last us the whole year.
Really?
Of course, if you pick the flowers to make elderflower cordial, there's two things that will happen. One is you won't get berries, so you can't, in fact, make wine or other things if you pick all your flowers, but you also make sure it doesn't spread too. So by picking flowers and not letting them go to seed, you're stopping them from becoming weedy wherever you are.
Yes.
But it doesn't stop a cordial. You can make elderflower champagne, you can make elderflower fritters, and you dip them in a beer batter and you've got a handle when you cook them. So you can make all sorts of things with the flowers. Of course, the most important thing that you can do with them is, in fact, that the stems can be used to make pan pipes.
Oh my goodness.
A little bit of El Conde Pasa is coming my way. And of course, even more importantly, depending on what your cultural background is, in certain parts of Europe, if you grow elderflowers in the garden, they will keep away witches.
What about wizards?
Well, I'm not sure about
non-gender specific.
I don't know. It says witches in all the books. But I might add there are certain areas in Europe where it is said that witches have their covens under the elderflower tree.
Now, can we generalise in terms of conditions?
Yes. You can.
Go.
All right. Generally speaking, the forms of Sambucus nigra and, in fact, canadensis and racemosa, which are also Northern Hemisphere species, tough, hardy, easygoing shrubs for moderately reasonable soil. They don't really care that much. Well drained, they don't like wet feet. They'll cope with the cold, they'll cope with the heat in the summer. There's actually not much that really bugs them in the sort of more Mediterranean to cold climates.
Right. And obviously they're all deciduous.
They're deciduous. They're easy to propagate. You can grow them easily from winter canes, so just sort of pencil length and thickness canes.
Like a hydrangea.
Exactly like a hydrangea, so you can strike them very easily. Yeah. And I have to say, although my collection probably extends to 18 or 20 species and forms, in Europe and parts of North America, there are dozens of other elderflowers that we just don't have in Australia. Yes. And because of their slight weedy potential, they're probably not on the allowed list anymore. Right. So I imported a few varieties 10, 15 years ago. I probably couldn't go through that process again.
Yes. And what about the Australian ones? Do you grow any of those?
I don't. I'm not fond of them because they are suckering thugs. They go everywhere.
Suckering thug, and who likes that?
Yes, and I might add some of the European herbaceous ones are the same. I did have one called rather weirdly Sambucus edulis that I planted in my garden, and it took me about 4 years to get rid of it. It came up everywhere.
Be warned, be warned.
So you do have to be careful with some of them. But the forms of nigra, they make reasonably restrained bushes. They're fairly easy to control other than for self-sown seedlings, which you need to watch out for. But if you do leave some seedlings, particularly if you've got a collection like mine, you may well get something interesting.
Yes.
And I have.
Yes. Which is?
This one.
Yes.
I selected this particular variety. It looked slightly odd as a little seedling as it came up. When its leaves first come out, they've got a sort of a chocolatey colour about them. Yeah. They tend to go green as the summer comes on. It gets very large heads of white flowers with a little bit of pink, so lots of cordial potential. And I've called this one, because of its mythological sort of background, I call this one Witch Hunt.
Witch Hunt. There you go.
Yeah.
Is it available commercially, Steve?
I have grown a few of them. I must do another batch. So I have been selling a few of my Witch Hunt Sambucus out there. I think a good plant name has to connect with the plant somehow or another.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair
so
enough,
I'm quite happy with that name.
Now, I can see that in some of your aspects, they're in dappled shade and others a bit more exposed. Is there a generalisation about light?
Not as a whole, but I do have to say the dark-leafed ones are better in more sun.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One is if they don't lose their colour, they create a black hole because you've got no light shining on them to sort of lift them. Yes. But what tends to happen, in fact, if you don't get a fair bit of direct sun on them, they actually, the colour bleeds out of them a bit and they go a greeny brown. So they lose their really strong colour. Yeah. So the dark leafed ones, yes, must be out in the sun to perform well. But any of the other forms, they can go in shade, sun. They don't mind too much as long as it's not really dense, heavy shade.
Right, okay. Well, I think we should go and explore the National Collection.
Why not indeed?
Let's have a look. And what is this variegated beauty, Stephen?
Well, there's any number of variegated forms of elderflowers.
Yes.
This is probably the most striking.
Yes.
And it's a cultivar called Madonna.
Aha! That's why it's striking.
Yeah, well, it probably is. And it was imported into Australia only a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
And it's a reasonably compact one. This one was cut quite hard this last winter and actually shifted because it was too close to the front of the border.
Oh, okay.
And it's refurbishing itself superbly.
And it coped with being moved, okay?
Yeah, yes, it hardly noticed.
Madonna is tough.
Yes, she certainly is.
And how big will this one get?
This one's not quite as large growing as some. 2.5 to 3 metres will probably see this one out.
Okay.
So the variegation does tend to inhibit growth a little bit.
Ah, is that across the board with variegated
Yeah,
things?
most things. Most plants, the variegated form isn't as vigorous as the green because in fact the chlorophyll is not in evidence in the yellow bits of the variegation.
Right.
So they haven't got as much chlorophyll to feed themselves with.
Fascinating.
So there you go.
All right, on to the next in the
Fantastic.
National Collection.
Yes.
Another part of the National Collection. What is this one, Stephen?
Well, this one's a comparatively new one in Australia at least, but it's very popular overseas. I've seen it in practically every garden of note through France and England.
Yes.
And this one is Sambucus black lace.
I wonder why it's called black lace.
Well, it's a fairly obvious name actually, but rather good one because it does have this beautiful blackish lacy foliage, so it's a cut leaf elder.
Yeah.
Pale pink flowers, and it makes a wonderful shrub in the garden. It's just got, I don't know, presence.
It really does. The leaves are stunning and the combination of the petals with the foliage is gorgeous.
Yep.
What do the berries look like?
Typical Sambucus berries. All of the forms of Sambucus nigra have the black berries that you can make your wine with or whatever.
How gorgeous. All right, on to the next.
Let's go.
And what is this one? Beautiful flowers.
This one is a fairly old cultivar. It's
Yes.
been around for quite a long time. Sambucus nigra Laciniata, meaning cut-leafed.
Right.
And I believe this
They've all
was...
got cut leaves though, but...
No, Madonna doesn't have cut leaves. It has compound leaves, but not cut leaves.
Oh, okay.
This has compound cut leaves.
Oh, there we go.
Got to get
now
it right.
we all know.
Yes. Now, I believe this was one of the plants that was used in breeding black lace. So what they did was they crossed the cut leaf version with one of the compound leafed purple leaf versions and got the cut leaf purple version.
Aha!
This is a really lovely form and it can grow quite big. This plant's easily 4 metres tall.
Yeah.
But remember that Sambucus are very prunable, so if it gets bigger than you want, you can very easily cut it right back to a stump and start the whole plant off again.
So what's the lifespan of one?
Oh, they can live for decades, if not centuries. I mean, they go on for a long, long time. In the wild, they certainly become these quite large shrubs, the wild form.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're almost small trees.
The fragrance, it's actually quite beautiful.
Yeah, yes, it's this scent of elderflower cordial.
Oh, so it is. Okay, what's next?
Well, let's go and have a look at another one.
Let's do that.
This particular cultivar is one called Sambucus nigra Castledean, and I imported this some years ago from Dan Hinckley in North America. Its big claim to fame is in fact its darkish stems. So it has a fairly classical Sambucus foliage, but it has quite dark stems, which stand out well against the white flowers. It's a minor detail, and I'm not sure whether I should have gone to the effort to import this variety specifically, but it was one I didn't have, so I had to have it. So there you go, Castledean. Well, this one I'm very excited about. This is the latest introduction to Australia in the Sambucus genus, and this is Sambucus nigra Black Tower. So it has the dark foliage of some of the other varieties, but it actually grows as a fairly compact pillar-shaped shrub, up to about 3 metres or so, soft pink flowers, and I think it's a great addition to the collection.
Another dark leaf beauty, Stephen.
In fact, Black Beauty.
There we go.
And Black Beauty probably can take the credit for bringing Sambucus back into the limelight, so to speak, because it was one of the first of the really dark leaf varieties in cultivation.
Yeah.
It swept Europe as a garden plant.
Yeah.
So fabulous thing with its dark leaves and its rich pink flowers.
Yes.
And I might add in passing, if you make cordial from the pink ones, you get a rosé coloured cordial. If you make it from the white ones, you get a white wine coloured cordial.
Oh my goodness. So can I just ask, in terms of how you use them, so clearly the dark-leaved shrubs have a very specific place in a border or a garden. So how do you think about using them in terms of the green-leaved ones versus the purpley bronze ones?
All right. Well, the purpley bronze ones, purple foliage as a whole, not just with these, but purple foliage as a whole is very popular in gardens these days.
Yeah.
Everybody's after things like forest pansy, cercis and copper beeches and, you know, all of those lovely dark purpley foliage plants. But be warned, unless you're the Gothic gardener from wherever, you can end up with a very dark and potentially dreary garden.
Yes.
So I use purple foliages as accents.
Yeah.
So I use them amongst greens and golds and other different coloured foliages.
As we have here. And this is the golden hop, which we have done a story on before.
We certainly have.
Contrasts beautifully with this.
Yep. And it's growing through a really dark green weeping holly.
Which is very prickly, let me tell you.
Well, that's why you're standing on that side and I'm standing on this side. So we've got gold, we've got dark green, then burgundy. So you use it to sort of pull those colours into line.
And I suppose to that point then it needs to be in sun.
It certainly does. If you don't put these out in the light, they will make a black hole in the garden.
And they kind of lose the point.
And they do lose the point. And of course the colours tend to fade anyway in the shade.
There we go. On to the next, Stephen.
Now we've been discussing all of the different forms of Sambucus nigra, the European elderflower.
Yes.
This one is Sambucus canadensis Maxima.
Canadensis from Canada.
Well done. Yes.
Top marks for Latin,
Yeah.
Mr. Lucas.
Now, this is obviously a North American species. It's
Yep.
not restricted to Canada. And it's one of the few other edible species of Sambucus, and it's also used medicinally as well.
Yep.
And it tends to flower about a month later than the European elders.
Yes.
I haven't yet used this for elderflower cordial or any of the other elderflowery things,
Yep.
but I guess it's potentially useful for those things as well.
So same sort of general growing conditions as the European ones?
Yep, it's reasonably hardy, not particularly fussed about temperatures, not particularly fussed about soil moisture or soil type. So basically a very hardy shrub. The only major difference between canadensis and nigra, the European one,
Yep.
is that canadensis has a suckering habit. So you end up with it coming up far further away from the main bush than you might have expected.
Suckering and vigorous, two things to strike fear into the heart of a gardener, Mr. Ryan.
Well, those of the timid nature. Well, Matthew, I
Yes.
hope you enjoyed our little foray into the world of elderflowers.
I have really enjoyed it, and they do strike a chord for my English childhood. I remember seeing them a lot in Britain.
Yes.
But I'm just intrigued about the fritters, the cordial, the champagne,
I'm sure I've missed some. I'm sure there's other uses for these
the
plants.
panpipes,
Yeah.
our third hit album. That's amazing. Well, thank you. And thank you for holding the National Collection for all of our benefits.
Yeah,
Stephen.
I am so philanthropic.
What could we possibly do next week?
Well, something different, I'm sure, and it won't have anything to do with elderflowers, but we'll possibly visit another interesting plant.
We could, well indeed. So do hit subscribe because we post every week and you can keep up with our continuing adventures. But until then, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you later.
Bye all.